The early spring sunlight warmly bathed the earth, making the afternoon somewhat drowsy. David Smith lay on his desk, listening to the wind outside. His eyelids grew heavy, and he was about to drift off. Just then, his phone vibrated at an inopportune moment. David frowned, wanting to ignore the message, but worried it might be from his manager, John Brown. Reluctantly, he straightened up and checked his phone. It was a video message from his colleague, Michael Johnson.
Michael should be out at this time. What could he be sending?
His drowsiness nearly gone, David opened the video, and any remaining sleepiness vanished instantly. The video featured his wife, Emily Wilson. Despite it being early spring, she wore a skirt barely covering her hips, her alluring legs exposed. Emily was holding the arm of a bald man, the two of them walking intimately into a hotel. The hotel was the Mason Air Grand Hotel, an internationally renowned five-star establishment. The golden letters of the hotel's name were particularly glaring, piercing David's heart.
Could Emily be using work hours to visit a five-star hotel with another man?
He clenched his phone and questioned Michael.
Where did you film this?
Michael took a few minutes to reply.
Bro, I just happened to see it while passing by. I might be mistaken, but I thought you should know.
As a man, David understood. He slammed his fist on the desk, startling his colleague, Alex Taylor, across from him.
Bro, what's wrong?
Nothing, just watching a TV show. Sorry to scare you.
Alex gave David a slightly annoyed look but said nothing more. David quickly moved to the company hallway and called his wife, Emily. Her phone was off. Emily was a pharmaceutical representative, and her phone was never off, given her sales job. Unless she was doing something she didn't want to be disturbed. David was furious. He slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, Emily called him.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
David slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, his phone rang. It was Emily.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
David's face darkened with anger.
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
Emily seemed taken aback.
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
Emily laughed, but it sounded forced.
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
David was startled by the man and took a step back, looking at him in confusion.
Sorry, brother-in-law. Emily had too much to drink tonight.
He stepped aside, revealing Emily's face. She was still wearing the very short skirt from the video earlier that day, her fair legs showing off their elegant curves. Seeing his intoxicated wife, David couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. How could a woman drink like this outside, especially a married woman?
I understand. Thank you for bringing her back.
David helped his wife to the sofa. Since Emily could barely walk, her skirt kept riding up, bunching around her waist. David angrily pulled her skirt down, barely covering her thighs. This wasn't the outfit she had left the house in that morning. Emily wouldn't be waking up anytime soon, so David sat beside her, waiting for her to wake up and explain what had happened. After waiting for what felt like hours, David couldn't resist his drowsiness and fell asleep on the sofa. When he woke up, his wife was no longer beside him. He heard the sound of running water from the bathroom. David walked over and tried the door, but it was locked. He knocked twice, but Emily didn't open the door. David knocked harder.
Open the door. Why are you locking it? Are you afraid I'll see you?
Emily hesitated for a moment before opening the door. She was wrapped in a towel, looking at her husband through the steam.
Don't you think you owe me an explanation? Who were you with at the Mason Heights Hotel today?
David's words made Emily's face twitch involuntarily.
Honey, what are you talking about? I went to a meeting today and signed a big contract. That's why we're having a dinner party tonight.
David couldn't take it anymore. He pulled out his phone and opened the video.
Meeting or not, do you need to be so close with another man? Emily, do you think I'm a fool?
David had prepared a lot to say. He had been thinking all afternoon and evening, ready to confront his wife at this moment. But Emily wouldn't even pick up the phone or watch the video.
Honey, can you let me finish my shower? I still have soap in my hair. Let me rinse off first.
One sentence left David speechless. He quietly left the bathroom, listening to the water running again, feeling his momentum deflate. After a while, Emily came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, still drying her dripping hair with another towel. She sat next to David and opened the video.
So you saw someone taking advantage of me, and you think I'm involved with another man?
David was again at a loss for words.
No. But you did walk into the hotel arm in arm. And why did you change into such a short skirt?
Honey, our industry is getting tougher. Today, Mr. Clark asked me to change into this skirt to accompany the big boss in the video to secure the contract.
Your boss actually asked you to do that for a contract?
Emily calmly motioned for him to sit down.
Don't put it that way, honey. Don't we have any trust between us?
David felt deflated, collapsing onto the sofa. His personality, if put nicely, was obedient, if put bluntly, it was spineless.
All right, honey, I believe you. It's late, let's sleep.
That night, neither of them slept well. David was listless all day and took a nap secretly in the office. In the afternoon, he received a message from his wife.
Honey, we have another dinner tonight. Don't wait for me for dinner, I'll make it up to you over the weekend.
David's eyebrows furrowed instantly, but this time he was more cautious. He confirmed that Emily's phone was on, and when she said they had arrived at the dinner location, he immediately activated location sharing with her. Knowing his wife's location, David left home and headed straight for the city center. The so-called dinner location turned out to be a bar? David bit his lip and walked in, determined to see how his wife would explain this time. The Golden Night Bar was bustling, with 2 speakers on either side of the stage blasting energetic electronic music. Young men and women were dancing to the beat on the stage. David Smith squeezed in to see if Emily Wilson was among them.
She has to be here somewhere.
He searched diligently but couldn't find his wife. Unwilling to give up, he checked the booths below the stage but still didn't see Emily. Was the lighting too dim to spot her?
Where could she be?
He took out his phone and called his wife, but Emily rejected the call again.
Emily, why are you doing this?
David's face darkened further as he headed towards the private rooms at the back of the bar. The Golden Night Bar had 5 private rooms, each with a wall made of perforated screens. David checked each screen until he finally saw a glimpse of Emily through the last one.
There you are.
He wanted to go in but saw 4 or 5 people gathered around, seemingly discussing business. If it was indeed business, as Emily had said, interrupting them would affect their relationship.
Maybe it really is just business.
With this in mind, David took one last look inside and quietly left the bar. Late at night, Emily returned home reeking of alcohol. This time, she came back on her own but collapsed on the couch as soon as she got home. David, feeling heavy-hearted, helped his wife sit up to drink some water. Unexpectedly, as he moved Emily's legs, his hand slipped, and her legs fell back into place. Under Emily's tight skirt, there should have been one last layer of protection. But now, there was nothing.
Emily, what happened to you?
David felt like he was about to break down. A woman coming home late at night, and now her undergarments were missing. If Emily hadn't done anything inappropriate, he wouldn't believe it even if he were told otherwise.
I can't take this anymore.
He dragged Emily to the bathroom and turned on the shower. The cool water splashed onto Emily's head and body, startling her into a scream, sobering her up a bit.
What are you doing? Why are you drenching me with water?
Emily, I trusted you so much, and you went behind my back to meet another man.
I wasn't meeting anyone. I told you I was out for business.
You say you were out for business, but where are your undergarments?
Emily looked at her husband, visibly relieved.
I thought it was something serious. I took them off myself. The bar was too dark, and just as we were about to start talking, I felt something sticky on my undergarments.
Really?
I had no choice but to endure it. When I got home, I took them off directly. They're in my bag now.
David, still skeptical, opened Emily's bag and found the undergarments inside.
Why would your company discuss business in a bar?
It was the client's request. We had no choice. Honey, do you think I wanted to go there?
Just because of this, you drenched me with cold water. You're so annoying and mean.
Emily's explanation was flawless, and David could only sigh, drying her off and taking her to the bedroom to sleep. In the bedroom, Emily had already fallen asleep, her graceful body rising and falling with her breath. In the living room, David smoked heavily, staying up almost all night. Finally, it was Sunday, and the couple could rest properly. Emily got up early to make breakfast for David.
Honey, we haven't gone out for a while. Today, I'll be the driver and treat you to a big meal as compensation, okay?
David smiled bitterly inside. He had no mood for an outing, and if Emily hadn't done anything wrong, why was she always talking about compensating him?
Okay, let's go.
With these thoughts, David got into Emily's car. They each had a car for commuting. David's car was self-purchased, while Emily's car had its down payment covered by her family, and she was paying off the loan herself. As soon as he sat in the passenger seat, David noticed something odd about the seat.
Did someone adjust the seat? It doesn't feel the same as when I last sat here.
I don't know, maybe a colleague? I didn't notice.
David fastened his seatbelt, feeling uneasy. David was furious. He slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, Emily called him.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
David's face was dark with anger. Emily should be out on business, but it was unusually quiet around her.
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
Emily seemed taken aback.
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
This was the first time David Smith had ever snooped on his wife's phone. His heart was pounding again. Emily Wilson came out of the bathroom, smiled at David, and went into the bedroom to change into a nightgown, then returned to the bathroom to dry her hair. By the time she finished drying her hair, a hint of fatigue was evident on her face. She gently kissed David and went straight to bed without even glancing at the TV.
Size.
But just as he relaxed, Emily's voice came out again.
Honey, can you bring my phone in?
David quickly responded and brought her phone to her.
Thank you.
Emily was half lying on the bed, her chest revealing a large expanse of fair skin. She smiled sweetly at David as he walked in, but he barely noticed. Handing the phone to Emily, David quickly returned to the living room. The phone screen showed no changes, but about 10 minutes later, a WeChat message appeared. There was no sound from the bedroom, so Emily must have muted her phone. David stared intently at the screen and saw that it was from a man named Christopher Miller.
Text, transfer, 520 yuan.
Emily opened the chat, and Christopher was transferring money to her, 2 transactions, one for 520 yuan and another for 1,314 yuan. These suggestive numbers clearly indicated Christopher's affection for Emily. What Emily did next surprised David. She returned both transfers.
I can't accept this money. We're so familiar with each other, there's no need for this.
Please accept it, Emily. Honestly, without you, I wouldn't know what to do.
Emily seemed to start joking with him.
Why say that? You were doing just fine before you met me, weren't you? Sends playful emoji.
David stood up. He wanted to know who this Christopher Miller was and what his relationship with Emily was. He quietly walked over to the TV and saw that Christopher's profile picture was a jade pendant of guanine. Another WeChat notification popped up on Emily's phone. This time, it was from Matthew Clark. Matthew was Emily's boss. What was he doing contacting her so late?
Haven't you told your husband yet?
David couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to confront his wife and ask her what was going on with these 2 men. But at that moment, the screen mirroring suddenly cut off. Emily had noticed. There were rustling sounds from the bedroom. She must be coming over. David quickly sat down on the sofa. In that split second, he decided to say nothing. Emily walked out, holding her phone, her face a bit pale.
Honey, did you just use my phone to screen mirror?
David slowly raised his head and looked at his somewhat uneasy wife.
Yes, I wanted to use your phone to watch a show, but I couldn't find the app, so I just turned it off. What's the matter?
Emily's expression seemed to soften a bit, but she still looked at her husband with some suspicion.
All right, next time just tell me what show you want to watch, and I'll find it for you.
What, do you have some secrets on your phone that your husband can't see?
Emily laughed too, but it was a bit forced.
Of course not. I'm just worried you might not find what you're looking for. All right, let's get some sleep.
David chose not to confront his wife about Christopher Miller at that moment. He had realized that no matter how he asked, his wife would insist she was innocent and loyal. At this point, David found it hard to trust his wife anymore. He knew he had to uncover the truth himself. So he pretended to be unaware, planning to use the clues he had to investigate Christopher Miller's true identity. David quickly tidied up and lay down to rest. Emily turned over to face him.
Honey, has Mom been calling to rush you lately?
David looked at his phone, avoiding his wife's gaze.
No, and even if she did, it wouldn't help. Let's take it slow.
Emily blushed a little and loosened the tie of her nightgown.
Honey, how about we try tonight? I've calculated the best time.
David looked down at his wife's smooth, fair body. For some reason, he felt differently about her now. It seemed like someone else had seen and even experienced this before. The more he thought about it, the deeper his frown became.
No, I'm tired. Let's sleep.
Emily wanted to say something more, but David quickly turned off the light and turned his back to her. Normally, they might cuddle for a while or play on their phones before sleeping. But tonight, Emily knew her husband wasn't really asleep. Emily watched her husband, feeling a sudden urge to cry. In the darkness, looking at his back, she felt the distance between them growing. What she didn't know was that David felt the same way about her at that moment. Emily hadn't even driven out of the neighborhood when she felt her car shaking continuously. She hurriedly called David to report the issue.
Honey, my car is shaking a lot. I'm a bit scared to drive it.
Oh, really? Wait there, I'll come and check it out.
After inspecting his wife's car, David frowned.
Honey, your car's mileage indicates it's time for maintenance. Otherwise, it might have issues. I'll take it for servicing today. You can drive my car.
He handed the car keys to Emily. Emily gave David a grateful look and walked towards his car. David quietly got into his wife's car and stared at the dash cam, lost in thought. He first asked for leave from work and then drove Emily's car to James Anderson's repair shop.
Kevin, here for maintenance.
Yes, James. It's my wife's car. The spark plugs might need replacing. Can you check it out?
James skillfully opened the hood and replaced the spark plugs.
This car indeed needs maintenance. I remember you brought it in last time too. Anything else to replace?
Of course, if anything needs replacing, it has to be done here with you, James.
David laughed heartily.
By the way, James, can you get me a card reader? I want to check the dashcam footage later.
Since David was an old customer, James didn't ask much and directly found a card reader for him. He also had his apprentice take out the dashcam's memory card. While James was changing the oil and coolant, David inserted the memory card into the card reader and connected it to his laptop. Soon, several video files appeared, but they only covered the past week. David regretted not buying a memory card that could store a whole month's recordings back then. But it was too late to think about that now. David began to check the videos one by one. Emily drove to many places every day, making it a bit difficult to track. Most of these places were pharmaceutical companies, factories, and pharmacies, all work-related. David patiently watched until he made a discovery on the third day. That day, Emily drove for a long time and went directly to the outskirts of the city. There shouldn't be any business partners in the suburbs. Why did she go there? Emily parked her car outside a hotel named Bowie and stayed there for a long time. After about half an hour, the passenger door opened. Emily also got into the car. Although he couldn't see the face clearly, David was certain it was a man. Sure enough, a deep male voice sounded in the video.
Emily, long time no see.
David felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. It really was a man. And it was a man meeting Emily secretly in the suburbs. If it were a client, would they say long time no see in such a tone? Emily didn't speak but pointed upwards. Her finger seemed to be pointing at the camera, as if reminding the man that there was a dashcam. David was furious. He slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, Emily called him.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
David's face was dark with anger. Emily should be out on business, but it was unusually quiet around her.
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
David couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. The dashcam not only recorded everything happening outside the car but also captured the sounds and images inside. He had told his wife this himself. He didn't expect her to remember it so well and use it when meeting a strange man alone. How ironic. The man on the other end chuckled softly and then said something that infuriated David.
What's there to worry about? No one will check. So, did you miss me?
Christopher, don't be like that. I didn't.
Christopher? Christopher? He was the one who had been sending Emily money on WeChat. David felt a wave of weakness wash over him. When Emily spoke like that, she usually meant the opposite. And such tender, coquettish words were only ever directed at him. To see his wife being just as gentle with another man was unbearable. David felt he couldn't watch any longer. But an urge compelled him to keep watching. He wanted to know if anything had happened between them. However, Emily and the man didn't say much after that. Emily dropped him off at a corner and then drove back to the office. Although he didn't see any inappropriate behavior, what had happened during the half hour Emily was gone? David felt two forces clashing within him. One cold force reminded him that his wife and the man had done nothing wrong, and it was all in his head. The other, a burning force, constantly told him that Emily had already betrayed him. The two forces intertwined, causing David immense pain. Gradually, the burning force gained the upper hand, and David felt his heart sinking into a sea of fire. After the maintenance, David sat in the car, feeling numb. Was his ultimate goal really to get back at his wife? They had been married for nearly 5 years, and their love didn't seem as strong as it was at the beginning.
Should I install a monitoring app on her phone? If it backfired and Emily found out, I would be in deep trouble.
At that moment, Emily's message came through.
Honey, how's the car? Are you back at work?
Yes, I'm back at the office.
I have another social event tonight, but don't worry, I'll be home early.
David immediately felt anxious. He called Emily, but she hung up right away.
What's wrong, honey? I'm in a meeting. Text me.
No drinking. Come back early. Let me know where you are, and I'll pick you up.
After a long time, Emily replied with just 2 words.
Okay.
David lit a cigarette and smoked it fiercely, his heart filled with frustration. That evening, Emily sent him her location, a mid-range restaurant. Although it wasn't the bar from last time, David had a feeling she would still get very drunk. Waiting anxiously at home, David didn't even eat dinner, hoping his wife would contact him soon. But by 10 o'clock, there was still no word from Emily. His messages went unanswered, sinking into oblivion. At 10:15, Emily's call finally came through. David answered in a hurry, but as soon as he pressed the answer button, his heart sank like a stone into the deep sea.
Is this David Smith? I'm a friend of Emily's. She's not feeling well. Can you come pick her up?
David recognized the voice immediately. It was the same voice from the car's dashcam. It was Christopher Miller. He and Emily were together. David couldn't care about anything else. He drove to the restaurant as fast as he could. From a distance, he saw Emily leaning against a tall, thin man, wearing his coat. The man had his hand on her shoulder, seemingly comforting her softly. Each scene felt like a deep provocation to David. He couldn't take it anymore. He rushed over, pulled Emily into his arms, and gave the man a not-so-gentle shove.
Stay away from my wife!
David was furious. He slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, Emily called him.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
David's face was dark with anger. Emily should be out on business, but it was unusually quiet around her.
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
David was furious. He slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, Emily called him.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
David's face was dark with anger. Emily should be out on business, but it was unusually quiet around her.
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
David was furious. He slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, Emily called him.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
Avid's face was dark with anger.
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
Melise seemed taken aback.
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
Melise laughed, but it sounded forced.
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
Avid was completely panicked.
Honey, I was wrong. I really was. Please don't leave, okay?
Melise sighed, holding David's hand as they sat down on the sofa.
I was supposed to tell you tonight, but you really disappointed me today. The boss has assigned me to study at the Red Gold Pharmaceutical Factory. I'll be back in about a week.
Melise stood up again.
I'll be staying near the factory for the week. You should stay home and calm down.
Avid secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but then quickly realized something.
The Red Gold Pharmaceutical you mentioned, isn't that Christopher Miller's factory?
Melise's lips tightened, and she looked back at David with some anger.
I can tell you that Christopher Miller is indeed my ex-boyfriend, but we are just business partners now. Don't overthink it. That's all I can say.
While speaking, Emily had almost finished packing her things. David walked over to her and tightly gripped the suitcase.
Honey, can't we not go there? That Christopher Miller definitely still has feelings for you.
Melise's face turned pale, and her expression became somewhat awkward.
Honey, stop doubting me. There's nothing between us. I've already married you. What are you afraid of?
Melise knew exactly what David was afraid of, but was also under immense pressure, so she could only remain silent. After arguing for a while longer, David reluctantly let go of her hand.
If you really have to go, then I'll take you there.
Melise shook her head.
The factory is in the suburbs, far from here. I need to drive there, and if I need to go out for business, I'll still need the car.
Avid was still unwilling to let go, and finally, after his persistent insistence, Emily agreed to let Avid follow her in his car. The Red Gold Pharmaceutical Factory was on the edge of the urban-rural fringe, next to a budget hotel. Avid accompanied Emily to check in and followed her into the room.
This place isn't bad. Since you're alone, why don't I move in too?
Melise smiled.
Don't be silly. If you move in, how will you go to work? It's too inconvenient.
He coaxed David to leave with a smile.
It's not my first time studying at a factory. Don't worry, I'll be back in a week.
Avid initially wanted to stay, but after thinking it over, he left willingly. However, once downstairs, Avid didn't drive away. Instead, he parked his car in a hidden corner. He wanted to see what Emily would actually do here.
As night fell, David, like a detective on a stakeout, bought a loaf of bread and a bottle of water, eating while keeping a close watch on the hotel entrance. By 8 o'clock, the urban rural fringe was almost deserted. David charged his phone, feeling a bit bored. Maybe he was overthinking things? But just based on what Christopher Miller had said, David felt certain he would come to see Emily.
Round 9 o'clock, just as David was feeling extremely tired, a black Mercedes approached his direction.
Seeing the black Mercedes, David's spirits lifted. This was Matthew Clark's car. The company had already sent Emily to the Red Gold Pharmaceuticals factory for training. What was he doing here? David turned off the car lights and observed Matthew's car in the dark. His car was still running, and Matthew had one hand outside the window, the cigarette glowing intermittently in the dark. It looked like he was waiting for someone. David clenched his fists. If Matthew wasn't waiting for Emily, who else could it be? About 10 minutes later, Emily walked out of the hotel. She skillfully opened the back door of the Mercedes and got in. Through the windshield, David could see them talking continuously. Then, he saw Matthew take Emily's hand. After a while, Emily pulled her hand back and brushed her hair. Despite this, David's urge to floor the gas pedal and crash into them was overwhelming. He forced himself to calm down, the thought of confronting Emily and ending it all together appearing again and again, only to be suppressed each time. Just as he was about to lose control, another person walked over. "It's Sarah Thompson. I can't let her see me." Sarah looked around, saw no one, and then got into the car. 2 women and 1 man in the car. David's mind was filled with questions. After another 10 minutes, Emily and Sarah got out of the car. Surprisingly, Sarah seemed to have come alone and left quietly by herself. Just when David thought Matthew would leave and he could go upstairs to find Emily, he was surprised to see Matthew get out of the car and start smoking leisurely. A few minutes later, another figure appeared beside Matthew, and they both got into the car. The night air was still a bit chilly. David Smith sat quietly in his car, enveloped in darkness. He sneaked out of the car and stood at the corner of a noodle shop next to the hotel. From there, he could see the hotel's entrance without being noticed.
Thuo Clark and Christopher Iller had been talking for a while, their conversation lively.
If I remember correctly, Christopher had just returned from abroad and had connected with Wanyu Pharmaceuticals through Emily. Could I be mistaken? Or had they known each other all along?
Their voices were low, and David was too far away to hear their conversation clearly. But as they talked, Matthew looked up at the hotel, and Christopher followed suit. The direction they were looking at seemed to indicate Emily's room in the hotel. Both of them had malicious smiles on their faces.
Something's wrong. They seem to have known each other for a long time and are plotting something against Emily. Emily must have been deceived.
If he weren't hiding, David would have rushed over and given those 2 a piece of his mind. After a few more minutes of conversation, Christopher left, and Matthew drove away, quickly disappearing into the night. David watched them leave. He wanted to go up and find Emily but decided against it. He didn't know what to say to his wife at this moment. Perhaps if they met, there would be nothing left to talk about. If he told her what he had discovered, she probably wouldn't believe him. Driving home, it was already past midnight. David felt exhausted. He took a shower and was about to sleep when his phone buzzed with a message. Opening the message, David felt like the world was crashing down on him. It was a 3-minute video. In the video, Emily was lying under a heavy-set man. Throughout the video, Emily's face was clearly visible.
Who are you? Where did you get this video? What do you want?
The reply came quickly. David wiped his face and read the message.
Ha! Did you see your wife? How could you treasure someone so unfaithful? You're such a fool.
Who are you? What do you want? My wife would never do this. This is not my wife.
After sending the message, David threw his phone and collapsed onto the bed. He felt his world starting to crumble. Where had his gentle and lovely wife gone? David never imagined that his wife would betray him one day. All the reasons she had given before, he had foolishly believed. It seemed everything was wrong from the start. Emily had committed an unforgivable act in their marriage. David sat by the window all night. There were moments when he really wanted to escape all the pain. But in his struggle, he dismissed the thought. In the morning, David took leave from work and drove straight to a law firm. Around noon, he drove to the hotel near Hongjin Pharmaceuticals and called Emily. A confused Emily gave David her room number, still not understanding why he had come to see her suddenly. The door opened, and the familiar scent of his wife filled the air. David walked in silently. Looking at his slightly puzzled wife, her gentle face still so radiant, he felt tears welling up.
Honey, what's wrong? You look terrible. Didn't you sleep well, or are you sick?
Emily reached out to touch David's forehead, but he quickly avoided her. After a moment, David finally looked up. He stared into his wife's eyes and took out 2 copies of an agreement from his bag.
Honey, let's get a divorce.
Emily was utterly shocked, her mouth forming an exaggerated O.
Honey, what's going on? Did something happen? If there's something wrong, you can tell me.
David couldn't speak anymore. He found the video on his phone and handed it to Emily. Emily opened the video, and at first, she gasped in surprise. Gradually, her low sobs echoed in the room.
Honey, I know you suspect me, but listen to me, this is absolutely not me. Honey, you have to believe me.
David put away his phone, a twisted cold smile on his face.
What? Are you going to tell me this is a woman who looks exactly like you? She was filmed, and I just happened to see it?
Emily grabbed David's arm, not letting him leave.
Honey, this really isn't me, I swear. If it were me, I would.
Stop it. Do you think I would believe that?
Emily wiped her tears, staring at her husband with red eyes.
Honey, can you tell me who sent you this video?
Her question only aroused David's suspicion.
No one. And stop calling me honey.
The room fell into a deathly silence. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, silently shedding tears, while David crossed his arms, frowning in thought.
Honey.
Emily looked at David with tear-filled eyes, as if trying to hold on to him.
No matter what, you stay here for now. I'll figure out what's going on, and then you can come back.
David also sensed something was off. He needed to investigate everything, to find out who was playing him. David looked at the 2 divorce agreements in his hand but ultimately didn't let Emily sign them. Seeing his wife crying like rain, David felt something hot burning in his chest. He picked up the agreement, looking at Emily. Finally, he kissed her on the forehead. Even if they had to part in the end, he couldn't forget the years of their marriage. If they couldn't make it to the end, David decided he would never seek revenge on Emily. After all, she had once been his family. Driving back home, David looked at the somewhat dim room, feeling infinite emotions. It seemed like a long time since the room had been tidied up. Even when busy, Emily would take on most of the housework. Now that there might be no woman at home, it would probably turn into a mess again. David cleaned the house thoroughly and took a long shower. Then, he went to the study and took out his notebook, writing down everything that had happened recently. He carefully reviewed it and felt there were some issues. He looked up at the documents he had found while tidying the room. It was a copy of a stock subscription agreement. David was furious. He slapped his forehead, wanting to storm into the hotel and confront the pair. But he was still at work, and the impulse subsided a bit. Just as he was thinking of how to ask John Brown for leave, Emily called him.
Honey, what's up? Did you call me earlier?
David's face was dark with anger. Emily should be out on business, but it was unusually quiet around her.
Emily, I want you to tell me the truth. Where are you right now?
Emily seemed taken aback.
What's wrong, honey? Is something up?
Where are you now?
Emily laughed, but it sounded forced.
I'm at the Mason Air Grand Hotel.
Hen David Smith woke up again. He found himself in a cold place. As soon as he tried to get up, his body started trembling uncontrollably. Two people were arguing in front of him. Nearby, there were piles of goods, all as cold as ice.
Honey, you're awake.
Avid looked up to see Emily Wilson holding him. Her hair was frosted, and she was shivering too.
Where is this place?
Avid tried to speak, but as soon as he opened his mouth, his head felt like it was splitting apart.
You're finally awake.
Two people in front stopped talking when they heard David's voice. Under the glaring white light, David finally saw that it was Matthew Clark and Christopher Miller.
I noticed him that day. I should have taken care of him sooner.
Athu's face twitched with rage, as if every cell wanted to eliminate David immediately.
No worries, it's not too late now. He doesn't have any concrete evidence against us. What can he do?
Avid recognized the voice. It was the previously suave Christopher Miller. But now, his gentlemanly tone was laced with coldness and cruelty, like an emotionless executioner.
Christopher, Mr. Clark. What is going on here?
Christopher glanced at Emily, a cold smile on his lips.
Emily, if you had chosen me instead of this loser, we wouldn't be here today.
Emily's eyes widened in shock, as if she couldn't understand what Christopher was saying.
You two must have known each other for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, you have some unspeakable secret between you. Promoting Emily and even giving her shares was just to make her a scapegoat, right?
Christopher raised an eyebrow and then smiled.
Looks like I underestimated you. You're not as dumb as I thought. Even after seeing that video, you didn't leave Emily. David, you're pathetic.
Avid's lips curled into a bitter smile.
So, you sent that video. My poor wife was trying so hard to protect your interests, working tirelessly for the cooperation between our companies, only to be used by you.
Emily's face was filled with terror as she looked at Christopher.
Christopher, is this true? Tell me it's not true.
Christopher's pale face twisted even more.
Shut up! You! I loved you so much, and you broke up with me to be with this loser. Do you know how much that hurt me? Fortunately, when I returned, Mr. Clark found me. That's how Wan Yu and Hong Jin got a chance to collaborate. We went to great lengths to push you to the forefront. After that, all the dirty accounts of both companies will be pinned on you. And you will rot in the dark gutter with your loser husband.
Christopher laughed maniacally, accompanied by Emily's low sobs.
I thought we had said goodbye to the past, that we were still friends.
Avid looked at his wife and weakly shook his head.
Stop talking. This was all a setup. Christopher might not be sane anymore.
Hearing this, Christopher stopped laughing.
Why waste so much time talking? Let's go.
Athil looked at Emily, his eyes no longer filled with desire, but with a crazed intent.
We were going to use you for the new vaccine trials, but that's no longer necessary. This is a medical cold storage. No one will come here. Stay and freeze slowly.
At that, the two walked out of the storage room, and the sound of the door being locked followed. As the lock clicked, the cold storage door was completely sealed.
Fighting off a headache and dizziness, David Smith tried everything he could to open the door, but it was futile. The warehouse was getting colder and colder, as if Christopher Miller had turned the temperature way down.
Damn it! How do we get out of here?
Emily Wilson wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, which quickly turned into tiny ice crystals on her hand.
I'm sorry, honey. There were many things at the company I didn't tell you because I wanted to surprise you.
Emily, it's not your fault. We need to find a way out.
I thought it was a chance to make money and get promoted. I gave my whole life to the company, but this is what I got in return.
Emily lowered her head, her tears falling like broken pearls.
During this time, I tried to meet all of Matthew Clark's demands, even if it meant drinking until I was unconscious. I didn't expect he was just using me as a pawn.
Avid walked over and gently hugged his wife.
Don't say anymore. It's all in the past.
Emily's words brought a tinge of fear to David as well.
Honey, are we going to be stuck here?
No, we won't. We need to think.
He felt his pockets, trying to find his phone, but both his and Emily's phones had been taken by Matthew Clark and Christopher Miller. Emily looked pale, staring at the door.
Don't bother. Even if we had a phone, there's probably no signal here.
Faint groan echoed, barely audible but crystal clear in the cold storage.
Who's there?
Hay followed the sound and found a figure huddled in the corner among the medicines.
Sarah Thompson?
Hay rushed over. It turned out Sarah had also been knocked out and thrown in there.
Master, I'm sorry. It was Mr. Clark who made me help them.
Era sobbed and spoke intermittently.
That night at the bar, we didn't reach an agreement, and Mr. Clark was very upset. He told me to stay by your side until you took all the blame.
Emily sighed.
Maybe my judgment of people is really off.
Era cried harder, her body trembling violently.
What do we do? Are we going to stay here?
Avid frowned and kicked the cold storage door hard.
If only we had a phone, we might be able to call for help.
Era was stunned by his words. After a moment, she pulled out an old phone capable only of making calls from her pocket.
They took my usual phone, but they didn't find this one I use privately.
Avid quickly ran over and grabbed the phone. Unfortunately, there was no signal.
I'll try. There might be a signal somewhere.
So Emily and Sarah huddled together for warmth while David slowly walked through the large, cold medical storage with the phone. Just as he was about to reach the end, the phone signal suddenly showed 3 bars.
There's a signal!
Avid quickly dialed 911 and 112. Just before he lost consciousness, he heard a loud thud and saw several medical personnel rushing in. He passed out again. Later, the 3 were successfully rescued, and Matthew Clark and Christopher Miller received the punishment they deserved. They also learned that the video was secretly recorded by Matthew Clark with his bed partner, and Christopher Miller had used AI technology to create a face-swapped video. Avid had been so enraged at the time that he mistook the woman for his wife, not noticing the significant differences.
In the end, the couple learned the truth, and Emily was exonerated. After surviving the life-and-death ordeal in the cold storage, they reconciled. Emily left her job at 1U and found a more relaxed position. David continued working at his old company, and the divorce papers were long torn up.
Any day, David came home early. His wife had said she wasn't feeling well and had gone to the hospital for a checkup, returning home early, which made him very worried. Penning the door, David saw Emily sitting by the window, lost in thought.
What's wrong, honey?
Emily slowly turned around, her face clouded with sorrow, as if she had experienced something deeply saddening. David's heart sank. Just as he was about to go over and hug his wife, Emily handed him a test result. The next second, the sadness on her face turned into joy and sweetness.
Congratulations, you're going to be a dad.
Avid stared blankly at his wife, then fell into a state of ecstasy.
I'm going to be a dad! I'm going to be a dad!
If all the previous suspicions were Emily's fault, then from this moment on, she was the family's hero. David hugged his wife tightly. At that moment, he felt like he had the whole world.
The end.